Program Consultant. I'll be hosting today's event. Now that organizations are realizing the benefits of Agile, the next step is figuring out how to scale Agile faster, easier, and smarter. In fact, in a recent survey of version 1 customers, 61% told us that they're in the process of adopting Agile across their enterprises. In addition, it's clear from the volume of questions submitted in advance of today's presentation that it's a hot topic right now. So to help us answer these questions and help make scaling Agile a success, I'm excited to introduce you to Dean Leffingwell, a renowned methodologist, coach, author, and the creator of the Scaled Agile framework. Dean, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks.
Our goal for you is to leave today's session with a solid understanding of the Scaled Agile framework. And then next week, Lee Cunningham, an Enterprise Agile coach with version 1, will join me. We will show you how to implement the Scaled Agile framework within version 1 to scale Agile faster across your entire organization. So before we get started, I'd like to review a couple of housekeeping items. Dean's presentation will last about 40 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. For those of you who haven't used GoToWebinar before, you will notice at the top of the control panel on the left-hand side, there is an orange button with double arrows. You can click this button to collapse the control panel during the presentation so it doesn't interfere with your viewing. All of your lines are muted throughout the presentation. So if you have questions, please send them in using the control panel. At the end of the presentation, we will answer as many questions as we have time for. And thanks to all of you who submitted questions in advance. During the course of Dean's talk, many of these will be addressed. Finally, today's webinar is being recorded, and we will send you an email with a link this week to review the recording of today's event. So on that note, let's get started. And Dean, I'm going to pass control over to you.
Thanks, Andy.
And I'm unfortunately just noticing that we have a little bit of a lag here because I'm not seeing you show up as an option for a presenter. So I apologize for the delay. Dean, who have you logged in as?
I logged in as a presenter. Do I need to log in again?
And because I'm not seeing you on the staff or attendee list. So I apologize, everyone. Just give us a second to work through this. Dean, could you say something for me real quick?
Test, test, test. This is Dean. You might just want to send me a new presenter invitation, and I can just enter that really quickly.
I'm going to go ahead.
Oh, here we go. So
and do you have the control now?
I do.
Great.
And you should be seeing my screen at this point.
Yeah, we are seeing your screen. And now we are seeing the slides. Thanks, Dean. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry for the handoff problem. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me here, and thanks to version 1 for their gracious invitation to be able to talk a little bit about SAFe today. So I'm Dean Leffingwell, as you heard, and I'm going to go through a pretty much kind of a lightning talk, if you will, talking you through the high level of the Scaled Agile framework, focusing on a few things that I think are particularly relevant, trying to leave some time for questions, and then we're also committed to helping version 1 kind of publish the top 10 questions that come out. So we look forward to your questions, and we'll have some time to respond after the session. So not to worry if your question doesn't get answered. You can reach us through info@scaledagile.com. You can see that address there. That's the best place for general inquiries with respect to applying SAFe, using SAFe, licensing courseware, or or any of the above. So here's my tight and brief agenda. We're going to talk 6 to 10 minutes on Lean Agile and the business benefits that we've been able to achieve with SAFe. We're going to talk about the SAFe core values, the things that we built SAFe for, and the things that we focus on with our implementations. We've been doing implementations of SAFe and its kind of predecessor, scaled Agile model for years. And we're going to focus on code quality, program execution, alignment, and transparency, because those 4 things together give you the tools you need at enterprise class to be able to successfully scale Agile and achieve the business benefits. And finally, we're going to talk about leadership, and I think that's kind of a unique difference here, which is that the model that we're using is a little different than the team model. It's not about the teams in terms of scaling. It's about them in terms of their ability to create the product. But when it comes to scaling, we need different roles and different artifacts, and we need the leaders of our organization to step up and do their job, which is to help us and provide the leadership we need to get through this transition. So that's a key element of our strategy. It is our belief that managers and leaders are indeed responsible for the operation of the company, and if we're going to make a change vector of this size, we need them on board as well. So that'll be the last bullet. Let's talk very briefly about how we got where we are here. And I had been on hold in my bio saying I'd been at this for software methodologist / CEO for over 3 decades, and I woke up just a month or 2 ago and thought, it's time to admit that I'm now in my 4th decade. And I will tell you that 20 years ago, we didn't think it would be like this. We envisioned a much higher level of abstraction. We thought we would be working with semantically precise modeling tools and CAD systems and GUI frameworks that you could basically mock up and do automatic code generation and stitch together the business logic and have executable state machines to do all of this work. But the reality is not the case. So while we've had Moore's Law helping us in terms of creating hardware systems that support our software, and I think our product owners have Moore's Law plus. They can certainly envision far more than what the software can do. We haven't had Moore's Law in our development practices. We've had a much more measured pace through waterfall, iterative and incremental, and now Agile, and generally we haven't been able to keep pace. That's why we're always under the gun. That's why large projects still are challenging, and that's why most of us think back to the last really big software project we have, and we take a sense of pride, and we'll also take a sense of just disappointment that it didn't turn out as well as we had hoped. We have new methods afoot now. The Agile community has provided leadership here, brilliant thought leaders who have thrown away a lot of things that were encumbering teams and gone back to the code. And we're going to build on that. So we need Agile, we need Lean, and we need all of those things together in some kind of systemic approach, right? A systems approach to taking Agile throughout and across the enterprise. So I suspect that most of you have found your way to the Scaled Agile framework now. Just a couple quick notes. It is an on-live interactive website. It's updated sometimes daily, mostly weekly. Our commitment to ourselves and to each other is to have new content approximately every week. We do that so we don't spam people, and also we need to provide you some guidance as to what's happened. If you're working in the team area where we worked last week, you should know that new stuff is there or it isn't. So you might want to sign up to the blog feed, because the blog is basically our change management record. So when we make a material change, we update the blog, and if that comes in your inbox, then you can keep track if you're following the framework as well. Also, it's a work in process. We don't envision the framework being done. It would be complete only at such time as folks like you on the phone quit building bigger and better software systems and quit inventing new methods. So we see it not so much as, oh, Agile at scale is cool. We see it as Agile at scale is the coolest way we have now to develop software, but my personal commitment is to follow the trends in the industry, provide a little leadership when I can, and record what works best. So the framework is nothing more and nothing less than that, and it is a moving target. It's not frozen. We learn new things every day, and we update articles, and we add articles, and we're working right now on the next release, which is a summer release of the framework. Its history is pretty storied. I think we all came through iterative and incremental development in JAD, and the last 10 or 15 years. Simply put, it wasn't possible to do it right once. The old, kind of Crosby school of total quality management applies in part, but building it right once isn't what we can do. We're innovating. We're building basically intellectual systems larger than anything the world has ever seen, and we need multiple times to get that right. I was fortunate. I kind of grew up in Lean. I had a manufacturing group as one of the companies where I was CEO. I went to Goldrat School, had a solid understanding of Lean. When I got to Agile development after kind of leaving Rupp, I just saw Agile as an instance of Lean thinking, and I still do. In addition, we have product development flow now, Reinertsen's work, and we took that work into the field for about 5 or 6 years, and we went down and dirty with some large enterprises that simply needed to do much better in terms of their outcomes. You may have, excuse me, read one or more of my books. I tend to write to think. So when a body of knowledge builds up and I want to know if I understand it, I write it down in a blog post, and those words speak back to me. And sometimes they say, this isn't it, stupid. There's no way that this could work, or that you're expressing it right. And sometimes the words say, that's pretty cool. I think people could understand that as well. The best explanation right now of the Scaled Agile Framework is actually in my book, Agile Software Requirements, fairly recent vintage, just about 1.5 years old. It tells a better story, but at the same time, the website and the framework is moving on. So it tells a story that's, maybe 1 year or 2 old at this point. I'm the integrator of the framework. I think Andy called me the creator of the framework, but I don't think he meant the guy that created it. I think that was a East Coast spin on creator. I integrate data, and I've kind of always done that. I love new ideas, and when they come together in a systems approach, that always inspires me to think more. And here you see some other people. The folks on the right are principal contributors, people that kind of log in weekly and add content. Alex Yakima, a fairly young guy from Kiev, Ukraine. He's been with me for 7 or 8 years now. He was in an outsourcing company that I was working with. He's joined full time. A brilliant young guy. Alex still codes, competes in coding contests and katas, etc. Still gets the bits and bytes, and is also thinks like a methodologist. But we particularly thank our enterprise adopters, those people on the bottom, the companies that you see on the list here shortly, the people that said, we have some pain and something isn't working and we need to do better, and let's try this. And what you see in the framework is really a series of experiments that built on each other and were tuned and adapted until the benefits were there, and we got the results that we achieved. The results, when properly applied, frankly, are astounding. This is a bigger step change in business outcome benefit than the move from waterfall to iterative incremental development, or I even think from the move from iterative development to Agile. When you see the types of benefits we get here, you see John Deere, which graciously provided us the opportunity to do kind of a complete case study, and that's on the blog under case studies and in the framework as well. One of the things they're most proud of is their warranty expense was down 50% year over year from the time they adopted Agile. I don't know how they measure warranty expense, but I pretty well guarantee you they know how to measure warranty expense. And you think about warranty expense for a combine with some innovative guidance software on the Pampas in Argentina, who all of a sudden has an issue, you can see how much they care about that number. BNC Software, an early adopter, it wasn't called the framework then. They actually measured productivity. Israel Gott was the leader there, smart guy. He came in and they instrumented function points per developer per month, and at the end of about 18 months, they were up by an average of between 20 and 50%. Again, material enough that makes you wonder if you're selling snake oil here, and kind of frightening in a way. But we're not talking about improving a penny a share by cutting back on office supplies. We're talking about increases in employee engagement, substantive increases in productivity, much faster time to market, and much higher quality. So these are real results. They're not my results. I didn't do this work. These enterprises did this work. They instrumented the work, and they reported these results. And these results are available for anybody that takes the time and the effort and the is willing to bite into the substantial change vector that Agile at Scales imply. You see companies here like Discount Tire, America's largest independent tire dealer, 15,000 stores nationwide. I sound like an ad. Good guys, good people. They build their own point-of-sale systems, and if you're in a large multi-billion-dollar business and you deliver point-of-sale software, defects can be killers. They can affect customer satisfaction, dealer satisfaction, tire store technician satisfaction, and even affect revenue. So if those of you who read the Phoenix Project, which is kind of the current topical read on IT, you know what happens when you blow point of sale. Revenue drops. And Discount Tires, their claim to fame now, or the thing they're happiest about, is nearly 0 defects after each Styroscore system release. And if you contact Chris Chapman, he'll say, yep, and that wasn't true before. So again, really excellent results, results that are frankly stunning, and they'd be hard to believe if they weren't quantitative and measurable. Now let's move into the framework, but we need to stop and think a little bit about a broader surface area for considering Agile at scale. And with my background in Lean and being influenced by the Lean Software and Systems Consortium, now the Lean Systems Society, being influenced by the great work of Reinertsen and James Sutton and David Anderson and those people, Lean is a body of knowledge that provides a really deep and really rich, disciplined approach to thinking about organizational change management and the goals. I'm going to hit on these very lightly. It's a bit of a front end, and I always worry that I'm not getting to the point. But then again, I leave the presentation, I say, no, I think that is the point. So what is the goal of Lean? Well, the goal of Agile is cool stuff too. You know, smarter, faster software delivery. But the goal of Lean is even broader. Sustainably shortest lead time, best quality and value to people in society, most customer delight, lowest cost, high morale, and safety. That's a really solid goal. So I see some of the questions coming in that have come in already. It's like, okay, well, how do we talk about this, or how do we sell management on this? Let's start with a goal. If your management isn't interested in those things, your company's probably not long for the world. But 99.99% of your managers do care about those things, and that's why you're doing it. It's not to be more agile or to have more fun or even to empower the teams, although that's an incredibly fun goal. It's simply to get the sustainably shortest lead time and have our people feel great about it. A few quotes on the left that I won't read. I'll maybe just flip to the, well, use Taiichi Ohno's quote. He's the godfather of Lean, or at least certainly of Kanban. Basically saying all we're doing is looking at the timeline from when we get an order to when we get the money, and reducing the time by reducing the non-value added waste. Now here's some good news. Most of our waste is delays. And when you think about projects that you struggled with, they were never early. They were always late. So when you start and take a systematic approach to looking at delays, nobody is home defending the delays, and that gives you an insight in terms of value stream analysis and some of the surrounding tools. People write all this software. It's not ambiguous, and customers use it. But Lean's view of a customer is much broader than the view of Agile. Agile's view of a customer is a good one. It's that end user. It's that steel thread that brings this little slice of cake right to the end user so that widget delivers them value. But our systems are too big for that. Our systems are huge. So in Lean, it's a little different. Your customer is whoever consumes your work. So if I'm pairing with a developer and tester to develop acceptance tests, we are each other's customers. And if I'm giving that to the product owner as a proxy for the customer, he's my customer too. And if I'm moving that into deployment and I have a giant batch of stuff that might lack stability, I'm about to force a big blob of work onto my partner downstream. And what are the rules? Don't make them do wasteful work. Don't make them do it more than once. Don't overload them. Don't make them wait at all. Don't impose wishful thinking. That was always my fear as an executive. The facts, I always believed the facts were friendly, but boy, a false sense of security was my worst fear. So this is a, kind of the 5-minute overview of Lean, just to get us to the point where we're thinking the same thing, the goals are the same, and as we scale, we know what it is we're trying to do. And we certainly know that just like we learned with Scrum and XP, inspect and adapt, feedback is critical. It's not a buzzword. It's not a sign. It's a thing you do every day. There's no perfect translation for Kaizen, which means continuous improvement, but it's pithy and it's guttural, and it basically says, this was great, dang it, we can do better. So we can do better is the takeaway that every Agile team, every Lean and Agile team has. It doesn't matter how good it is. Take that satisfaction, but know that you can do better. Now, just a few years ago, I had finished my book on Agile software requirements, and I would describe it as Agile and not Lean. And Don Reinertsen, one of my heroes, wrote his new book, Principles of Product Development Flow. I personally believe that's the most important book that's been written on product development in my lifetime. Don is a pretty self-effacing guy. I think he wouldn't say this, but to me, he's the Deming of product development, the guy that we needed to create a set of principles we could live by. And you see those here. I can't go through them. I like to go through them. In our training classes, we spend almost a half day understanding how batch sizes relate to software. and the value of WIP constraints and how you can control flow. So this is how we get a lean and flow-based paradigm to work. And number one up there is take an economic view. So it says, let's let everybody understand the economics of the business. So this is the only explanatory slide I have in the Foundation's briefing for that. But it basically says it's not a trivial thing. We've got to balance, product costs, development expense, value, cycle time, and risks. And when we come up with a matrix of understanding of how to do that, and a few key rules on the right, you start to think, well, maybe we have a better way of decision making. We spent a lot of money on this feature. Yeah, and we've gotten some value, but there's a lot more to go. So in consideration of the future of that feature, do not consider money already spent. It's gone. Okay, now if that money spent means that there's just a little bit more to do a great big job, great. But if there's a ton more to get the other 20% of value, let's bail. And we can do that. We can do that with Agile. And understand the full value chain. One enterprise I was working with, we did a value stream analysis, and the software teams were in the hot box. And in the hot box, they're going, well, we just can't get stuff through there. We can't get the tools we need to master these large data. So we did a value stream analysis, and it takes them right now, that enterprise, 22 months from the time they have a new feature to when that feature appears in their, basically appears in a navigation database. We did value stream analysis, and we said that if software development went to 0, it would take only 18 months to get your new thing from insight to cash. So clearly, you can't just say we need to optimize software development. You need to optimize deployment, customer cycle, distribution, etc. So I've labored too long on taking an economic view, but believe me, if you talk to me more, we'll be taking an economic view. This is my favorite Agile slide. I've probably had 18 variants of this over the last decade. I got this from our buddy Drew. And it's easy for me to sit down with this slide and say, here's the difference. Mr. Customer, I know that you've just hired us to do a big job, and I know that you're considering a waterfall approach. In 8 weeks, would you like to see some documents, or would you like to see the first 8 weeks of working code? And now there's many discussions that can happen about, okay, what do you really mean by that? But that's a pretty easy sale. So this is my tipping point slide that says we can ship you a bunch of paper and some unverified code, or we can have software within 2 weeks, or at the latest 4 weeks. A simple model. While you look at this slide and you look at some of the customers on the upper right, came across my desk this morning. This, Andy, you're probably already aware of this. A July report from the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, Software Development, Effective Practices and Federal Challenges in Applying Agile Methods, a 20-some page report. And here's a little statement that it says in the report. For example, the Office of Management and Budget recently issued guidance that advocates the use of shorter delivery timeframes and approach consistent with Agile. As federal interest in Agile grows, ... Okay. If the GAO gets it, it's across the chasm. Now, they're either going to kill us and kill Agile, or we're going to make Agile work in their context. I think we should take the latter approach, and when that fire hose opens up, let's make good, scaled Agile work in their context. But it's not too late for somebody to play in the scaled level. I provide this slide as well for those that are new to Agile, and just make a simple point, and the point is this. Every feature, software feature that you have, the ones on my iPhone, the ones on my little remote control for my Samsung heater cooler here, becomes commoditized over time. And as they become commoditized, the win goes to the lowest cost producer. Well, that's not always the people that are leaders in the market. So if you want to do good work from an economic perspective, deliver a small set of highly reliable features very early when they're worth more. And the iPhone's a good example of that. It wasn't a very good phone, but it was a great office in the pocket, and that changed the dynamics of that industry. And I paid $600 for my iPhone. I can get 5 times that iPhone today for literally for $99 with a small contract. So early is good. Early is where all the money is. After that, you're fighting a commodity war. We in the software business, not so good at commodity wars. We're good at innovation. Stay early. Stay up front. Stay in there when the margins are good. And then, kind of lastly, we know that the biggest challenge with our prior practices is the fact that the waterfall just leaves the risk in. With delayed system integration, and if you look at a waterfall project from a standpoint of lean, it's a giant batch filled into a system of overly busy people with a fixed deadline. Lean tells you that will be a disaster and that quality will suffer dramatically. And we've learned that. And the reason that that happens with a waterfall model is all the risk is left to the end. And it doesn't have to be that way. We can march risk down, down every single day. And as we do that, we simply end up in a better place. So I won't highlight any more of these slides and kind of get right into SAFE, but this is in the briefing. These slides are for you, to kind of present to your management if that's where their brains are. And if they're already past that, then we should talk more about what SAFE looks like. And we'll do that now. SAFE is big. There's no question about it. There are about 55 artifacts and icons and roles and responsibilities. But application at scale is big, so we make no apologies. If the market starts building lots smaller applications, I could make a smaller version of SAFE. But given that we're supporting, in one case we have 1,000 people using SAFE that contribute to a single master code line, you have to have the constructs for that. So you have to know some things, like how content authority is defined. You have to know if those 1,000 people are contributing, how their UX experience is sensible from, from application suite to application suite. You have to know how those trains get fed. Where's the money come from, and what's the business architecture got to do with this? And when somebody says single sign-on is coming, we need to know it, and we need to know why. We need to be able to fit it from an economic perspective. So it has 3 levels: team, program, and portfolio. Those are arbitrary. These are just labels. Part of what we have to do as methodologists, we just pick words for things. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't, and we use those words and we put semantics behind them, and all of a sudden you have a new form of science, albeit, software method science in this case. So let's start with the teams, because the work does start with the teams, and this is almost entirely good news for the teams. Scrum got here before us. I don't know how we would be building the Scaled Agile framework if we didn't have Scrum. We'd have to invent something like Scrum to put underneath it. Those behaviors from the teams are largely unchanged. If they've got some XP people in there and they're doing a good job of collective ownership and peer review and some pairing or pair work, maybe not all pair programming, continuous integration is a battle they fight every day and continue to win. They're going to largely continue on the game. The difference is we're going to have to organize them a little bit differently, and we're going to have aligned sprints because we need to integrate their stuff. Those teams will branch. Now we coach them to put their code in the development branch, and lots do, but that's a story that's written over time. And in the meantime, they're going to branch a little bit, so we want to make sure that we have synchronous sprint cycles so that we can bring those branches together at least every 2 weeks. But we're dependent on empowered self-organizing and self-managing teams, and we really mean it, because we can't scale this thing at the enterprise level without it. And I think we are constantly amazed at the amount of work that we do with the teams to really make Scrum and Scrum XP, what we call Safe Scrum XP, work right. Because if that doesn't work right, it's not going to scale. If those teams have a lot of technical debt, if they can't finish their work in their time box, if they can't estimate in some reasonable way with stories that other teams can't estimate largely the same way, it's not going to scale. So it is just the basic practices, but it is the basic practices done right. And for all of you who are familiar with Agile, that's not a small deal. We also, a few years ago, we didn't talk so much about code quality. We were pretty happy with the, kind of the Scrum-based rollout. And Scrum does improve code quality primarily by virtue of the feedback from the role and the aggregating developers and testers. But Scrum doesn't tell you how to write the code. So for that, we have to look at, some of the other practices primarily inspired by XP. And this is an area that we're building out over the next year or so in SAFE. So you'll eventually find good descriptions of test-first development and acceptance test-driven development, continuous integration on SAFE. Right now, there are thoughts and there are lightweight descriptions, but we'll have a lot of muscle there over the next year or so, because if the teams can't create great code, we're not going to be able to scale that. So code quality is a core value, and the teams own that problem. Now, it's also true that in the larger enterprise, the team is too small a thing to think about or reason about. So if I have 1,000 people, I have 130 teams. Well, how would I go about looking at the sprint demos, if you will, for each of those 130 teams? Well, you can't. So how could the business owners get feedback to each of 130 teams? Well, you can't do that either. So the team is at the wrong level of scale. It's at the wrong level of abstraction. And no individual team in a larger enterprise can create enough business value to get the attention it deserves. But when those teams come together and they're aligned to a common mission, which we help feed them, Now they start to think, you know, well, we sprint all the time, and we have good stuff here, but our enterprise probably can't eat this stuff every 2 weeks. I mean, we're not a website. Well, if we are, we can push, but we're probably not. We're probably doing some distribution, or maybe we're shoving big infrastructure stuff to Verizon, and I don't want my new stuff every day or every week. So we have this thing called a potentially shippable increment, which is only a date, right? And it's a date at which there's more value than there was at dates before. It's not necessarily a release date. As a matter of fact, rarely is it. But it is a planning date, and it's a date that provides planning, cadence, and synchronization. And cadence and synchronization are the things, the watchwords that we use in order to help us scale. And we move the value discussion up. Stories are too small at this level. A group can have 1,000 or 1,500 stories in flight. Stories are perfect for teams. They don't scale, right? The product managers are going to deal with are going to say, you know, when I launch a new version of Safety, how could I describe the features and benefits? And if I give them this 190 stories that we just completed to, you know, to build out the next version of Safe, they're going to look at me askance and askew. And if I say, oh, by the way, you have to write that as a bigger user story, they're going to tell me to go pound sand because they know how to describe features and benefits. They've been at that since longer than we have, and they don't need to be taught that new thing. We do need to teach them a bunch of new things, by the way. We need to teach them the way an Agile enterprise works, but it's fundamentally a different model. So we think about these larger piles of value, and now you think about, ooh, I could get that VP or that product manager or that deployment ops guy in here every 10 weeks and get some feedback. And these teams plan face-to-face. Face-to-face release planning is key and core to Safe. If you can't plan face-to-face, or at least in your distributed environments, plan synchronously and semi-face-to-face, then this might not be the right model for you, because that's how we get alignment. That's how we get the dependencies identified, and it's how we get teams to take responsibility for them, because nobody can manage the dependencies from team to team other than the teams themselves. And just to make it clear, because there's much misinterpretation and misinformation, partly because the way we drew it and the new picture is going to look different, this is what we mean. Teams sprint, the system sprints 2, we hope, and you can use that to ship whatever you want. So we call that develop on cadence and deliver on demand. So you're not relegated to shipping only on PSI boundaries. You can ship whenever the market requires it. So if you can keep your technical debt under control and keep your sprints tight and keep your system integration in place, then you're going to have the option, new optionality. I can ship whatever makes sense, whatever customer makes sense, whenever it makes sense to do so. So the cadence that we've applied here is not the release cadence, it's the development cadence, but we use a cadence in development to help manage the variability of R&D. But when we ship, that may be asynchronously. It's really up to the business to decide that. That's not our call in software development. The next big piece of this is that if you want to get impact and Agile in your organization, you have to kind of stop thinking about the team for a while and start thinking about the program impact. So we have these constructs called the Agile Release Train, which you just saw here in the middle. Sorry, I never do that. I always go backwards. The Agile Release Train is the program level mechanism that delivers most of the value, and they also can synchronize. They don't always have to, but you may well discover that your programs have dependencies between them. And when they use the same cadence and synchronization, life is really good as well, because now I know when to affect somebody's backlog. We drive them not by story backlogs, by vision and roadmap. We use lean economic prioritization. That's called weighted shortest job first. That's that little kilo indicator icon on the big picture. So those of you who want to understand program level economic prioritization, click that and see what our schema is. It's kind of unique and different and extremely powerful. We can get fast customer feedback down this path in our kind of 10-week kind of Uber sprints, and the reliable cadence starts to make software development teams reliable and predictable. And if you ask, there are many executives on this line who said, you know, right now would you rather have a 10% increase in average productivity or a higher degree of predictability? You would think the right answer should be, the economic answer would be, I take the productivity. But the answer you're going to get is, if it was predictive, I could run my business and I could increase productivity. But if it's not predictive, I really don't have anything. So this cadence-based deliveries of high-quality software tends to put the bloom on the rose again in the development shops. The portfolio came last as we scaled Agile. Of course it did. It's where the big decisions are made. It's where the investments come from. And if any of you have followed the framework for a while, the original portfolio language and methods as we described in Agile software requirements evolved quite a bit. And this picture is far different now because we have a different understanding of the way in which we want the portfolio to influence us than we did before. And there are a number of reasons for that that I won't go through here, but just be aware that this is evolving. And what we look at here is centralized strategies and decentralized execution, meaning that we establish budgets for trains. But once that's done, the teams on that train and the product manager shouldn't have to come back begging to the portfolio or the project office and say, hey, I need 60K for feature A, because these are long life trains. These are value streams. These are things that we're going to be doing, in perpetuity. So we have to have an economic model that allows for budgeting and cross-cutting epics to be centralized, because that's because where central decision making has the right economic impact. Those are long life decisions. They don't have to be revisited, and they have huge economies of scale. So, this is software development is not a democracy. We want to know what the strategy of the business is, but then we want to be empowered to execute from a decentralized standpoint. And that brings us to the core value of alignment. If you do the vector math on team productivity, and you had, let's say, 10 A teams who had a 20% disagreement in opinion as to what they're trying to build, and you put them up against 10 B teams who had 100% alignment on what they were trying to build, the B teams will win every single time. Just do the vector math. So alignment trumps local concerns. And we spend a lot of time in SAFE around the issue of alignment. Here you see how we do that at the team level, from the program backlog through release planning and back up to team and program PSI objectives. Having objectives clear and committed is a huge part of SAFE. SAFE is a commitment-based system, right? It depends upon teams understanding their environment, being empowered, bidding their work, and then accountably delivering their goods a lot like they said they could. And that's necessary because our enterprise needs that. They need some degree of fidelity. Now, we're not talking about 1 year from now we've committed foo. We're talking about, in this next PSI, we're going to have this stuff at the feature level, and in the PSI after that, it looks a lot like this. But SAFE is based upon commitment. SAFE is based, like Scrum, on the fact that if I ask a team what they can do in a time box, they have a really high probability of being able to do what they say, and moreover, they own that answer, and they're going to be committed to do what they say. So that's the fundamental motivation, unlocking the intrinsic motivation of teammates and developers and testers who want to do well, and giving them empowerment, and then also having them deliver accountability. So we have lots of words on alignment. We never get tired of the subject, and the whole point of the PSI planning session and the whole point of some of the engagements that some of us and some of you are involved in is to go in and find alignment, because alignment follows first law of thermodynamics, right? Entropy of the universe is always increasing. So the way to fight that is you have to bring the pressures to bring alignment back into case. So alignment is a key element of the strategy. At the portfolio level, we run into a lot of legacy approaches, and the reason is that's what we taught. I was here teaching those people that you needed to have a well-formed requirements document. That was me. Well, I've learned some new things. I've learned a lot, and when I learn new things, I refuse to be, beholden to my prior opinion. That's what I believed then, but I've learned new things, and I believe different things now. So we've got to bring the PMO and the portfolio people along for the ride. And there's a deep dive in SAFE, in particular in training, about how to implement all of these important functions that you see here, but from an Agile perspective. So strategy and investment funding, it's critical. Somebody has to make those decisions and provide the money, and boy, we better provide feedback on the money. Program management, it would be great if in a large enterprise my programs had a common operating model. They have words for that in Finland. It's called the way of working, and they focus really hard on understanding the way of working, and they don't change the way of working easily, but they do evolve it, and when they do, people are supposed to adjust to the new way of working. So if I have a new way of working across Agile programs, it would be great if that worked across the enterprise, because then all of a sudden large cross-cutting epics could be implemented, reporting would look the same, and life is good. The toughest word on this list is the last one, governance, and I know that that's that's a duck and cover word for a lot of Agile teams. We don't look at it that way. We look at governance as feedback. If an Agile team is supposed to provide, inspect and adapt and provide fast feedback at the sprint level, and programs provide feedback at the 10-week level, wouldn't we think that we want feedback on how our strategy is working? Of course we would. But we need not the old milestone stuff we gave them. We need objective fact-based measures and milestones like, does this code work? How would I find out? Come to a PSI demo. I need to understand what the customer's perception is. I have an idea. We'll have them there. Why don't you ask them? I need to understand what our current quality is. Great. Quality hasn't changed. It still gets fed from Jira or Quality Center or whatever. Great. We have all that data. But it's objective because it's based upon working code. The Agile Manifesto, I think it's bullet 11, says, hire motivated teams, trust them to get the job done. Agile and Lean are based upon trust. I wish they weren't in some ways. I say that kind of facetiously because trust is hard to get. No framework can give you trust. Trust is earned every day inside the enterprise. What the framework can do is provide transparency. And even in our own group right now, we've got some issues where we're not kind of happy with our performance, and we're not trusting ourselves and our people in a certain area. And we're right now today building a new big visual information radar Kanban board just for that set of issues, because without transparency, we have no idea what our issues are. So SAFE is heavily based upon the notion of complete visibility. Everybody should see that, hey, single sign-on is coming along. Everybody should be able to see that the epic in the upper right corner is the right epic. Everybody should be able to see the code. The team should be able to evaluate the code. The program should be able to evaluate the code. The system team should be able to evaluate the code. People can come and see the code, and if the code stinks, people should say, this code stinks. And the teams go, you're right, this code stinks. Here's what we have to do to improve it. So we, again, believe very much that transparency is our key, and that if we can just simply build a model that delivers transparency, then the good enterprise at least can make trust out of that. And lastly, I left one of the key Lean items behind when I hit the fast forward button back there. I left the foundation. Let me tell you a story. So one of the big rollouts at SAFE was a manufacturing company, a global 25 brand in a world of hurt in some areas. And they did manufacture stuff, although they're mostly a software business. And because they manufactured stuff, they were lean thinkers. And they totally understand work in process and the insidious nature of it and how it affects flow. And they understand queue sizes and batch sizes and bottlenecks and constraints. And when they bring their partners on board, they bring on a new manufacturer. And the new manufacturer says, come teach us Lean. They say, we will. We're happy to do that. It's part of what we do. So they teach them Lean, and they get the executives and managers together, and they do something different. They don't walk out on the floor and teach the people who are building stuff how to build stuff differently. They take the managers aside, and when I can see people face to face, and Buster never actually responds to this question. My dog here is in the room with me, and I look at him, but he's right now just giving me a dumb look. I say, Buster, how long do they train Lean thinking manager teachers before they go back to work? And the answer is between 2 and 6 weeks. And I ask yourself, amongst you and your peers, think about your peers for a second. Think about the people that aren't quite ready to make the plunge to these more innovative methods. How much training have they had in Lean and Agile? And how prepared are they to head down this path? So we need to prepare them. And I was reminded of when I was taught XP. I was taught XP by a guy who's a brilliant guy and a little hard to work with, but boy, he was a brilliant programmer. And I was trying to understand his paradigm because I'd never seen it. And he had a piece of code and he wrote a unit test around it. I said, what are you doing with that? He said, well, I'm testing my code. And I said, well, don't you think it works? He goes, no, I know it doesn't work. It rarely works until I put a unit test on it. And what's more, it'd be irresponsible of me to put that code in the baseline without a unit test because it probably doesn't work. And I said, well, boy, you seem to be taking that really seriously. He said, Dean, I took responsibility for this story. This is my story. I have to produce a quality story. Well, that really impressed me. I said, you know, if XP people work like that, now maybe he was a bit of an exception. I want people to work like that, but I want to up the order of magnitude, about 100 to 1. If Agile is going to work and Lean and Agile is going to work in your enterprise, somebody has to take responsibility for that. And it can't be me, and it can't be your coaches, and it can't even be your Agile working groups and your Agile centers of excellence. It has to be management and leadership. And if they take responsibility, they'll own the mission, and they'll have accountability as well. And that's the only way to win. So a few ideas here. Read the book, Agile Software Requirements, or maybe do a brown bag seminar with Reinertsen's book, which is a fantastic book, or the Project Phoenix is lighter read and a little more fun. It's a little off base for what we're doing here, but it's a great read. Join the community. Get help from us. Get help from the experts. We have an open community LinkedIn forum that you can join as well. And simply put, we're dependent upon you. You are the people that will make this happen, not the teams. We hope the teams are represented. We hope they're ready for the next big gulp of Agile at scale. But it's really up to us. It's up to the middle managers, the leaders, the PMO people, the dev managers, test managers, the QA managers, the deployment managers, the IT people, the architects, the database analysts. These are the people that are going to make this happen. And in all the rollouts we've done, we've taken a pretty simple approach. And that's right up there in bullet 3, Lean Thinking Manager Teachers. We've trained them all. And we typically start there. And I remember in that one rollout that has 1,000 people, we trained 160 people worldwide before they did the rollout. That was the fastest and most successful Lean Agile rollout I've ever seen. Why? Because we got to the people. We gave them the skills, the tools they needed, a new way to think about things, and they took responsibility for the initiative. Everything else is kind of secondary to that. If you can get your managers and execs to take responsibilities for the initiatives, you'll succeed as well. Now, before I hand the podium back, this is our list of extensive resources. We're here to help. We've made the framework public. You can implement it without us. It's free. It is, however, copyrighted, so you can't copy it and you can't change it. But you can use it, you can implement it, and you can come to us and others in our community, our partners, if you want custom courseware or you want to make a custom version of the framework within your enterprise. And Andy, I think I'm going to take it back, hand it back to you.
Thank you, Dean, and you did a pretty good job of walking through the Scaled Agile framework. So I hope everyone, I know how hard it can be to summarize that information because there is a lot to it. And so before we dive into the Q&A session with Dean, we did have some questions come through. I'd like to remind everyone of part 2 of this webinar series next Wednesday. Lee Cunningham and I will be showing you how to implement the concepts of the Scaled Agile framework within version 1. And we're going to cover items such as how can you use investment themes to manage your alignment and your capacity allocations to make sure you do have the proper alignment at the portfolio level. At the program level, how can you leverage time-based views to keep everyone up to speed on your PSI objectives, your potential shippable increment objectives for the release train? And then at the team level, we're going to be covering what makes version 1 the easiest enterprise Agile tool to adopt for your Agile teams. So we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. In addition to joining next Wednesday, Dean did give you some guidance on, where would you head if you want to educate yourself some more. We've also provided a few next steps below that you might find valuable. SAFE does have a monthly newsletter. There's a link on the screen now to learn more about their training offerings. Having been through the SAFE program consultant course myself, I definitely learned a lot from immersing myself with other people from the same background who are looking to solve the same problems. And then finally, the Agile Managers Forum there at the bottom, that's a place where you can go if you want to continue the discussion. We will be posting the slides from the webinar series out on that forum and also answering the top 10 questions that came through today, as well as we're going to review the questions that were sent before the webinar began from the people that attended. So with that, I did want to jump to some questions we had come through. And the first one, Dean, that came up was around applying SAFe in different contexts. So I'm just going to generalize a couple questions. There was can Lean Agile be applied effectively in ERP systems? And we also had a question about construction projects. So could you just give a little bit of background into
Sure.
when does Lean make sense? What are the right environments for it?
Okay, so Lean always makes sense, but SAFe doesn't always make sense in certain contexts. So for example, if I was rolling out an ERP system, I would look at this and say, do I have teams involved? Are they cutting scripts? Is the system I'm rolling out supportive of an incremental rollout strategy, or does it have to be big bang? And if the answer was it's supportive of that, I would take a cadence and synchronization-based approach to managing that program. Okay. When it comes to construction projects, I don't do construction. Do the principles of product development flow apply? Probably. I mean, certainly, basically committing to work, taking responsibility for work, providing feedback, etc. Fine. But SAFe was designed for large-scale software development. It works great at that. I make no other claims for small or can you run a business with SAFe? I don't know. We use elements of SAFe in our business, and we use traditional elements as well. So I would say that SAFe is targeted at large-scale software development. Doing any one thing right is actually kind of hard, and doing large-scale software development is actually extremely hard. So I would be reluctant to comment or wander out into other areas when there's so much work that can be done in the software community.
Okay. So hopefully that helps those people who are asking about different contexts. We had a few more come through around, does it work in hardware and all that. So
it does work. It does work in hardware, by the way, and many enterprises have mixed embedded systems. Deere, for example, those are embedded systems. The hardware basically uses SAFe as well. Their user stories are things they need to do to update an ASIC.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. Next question, it's one that I've actually been in some recent conversations around, and I know that you guys do have some guidance on it, and to me it becomes kind of a hot button topic, and it's the question around story point normalization. It asks, do you agree with normalized story points across multiple teams? And if so, what formula would you recommend? So how do you really approach that problem where you have, all these Agile teams who have a lot of autonomy, and what do you guys recommend?
Okay, thanks for that one, Andy. You could have easily not picked that one. Now you owe me one. Okay, well, the story is very simple, right? At the program level, teams need to bid things in a way that makes sense. One of our customers right now is doing a migration of JBoss across their entire enterprise. They need to know what the economic benefit of that is. That means that teams need to bid the work, because we certainly don't want the architect to bid the work. So if I have, some cool XP teams, a small team with a velocity of 12 and a huge team with a velocity of 8, and I have somebody else, doing gummy bears per sprint, and I have teams with 1-week sprints and 3-week sprints, you can't make any sense out of any of that. So we simply align the teams to 2-week sprint boundaries, and we don't normalize velocity. What we do is normalize the starting point for story point estimating, and I won't go into the details for that. It's a simple algorithm that basically works. Once you've done that, you have everybody started down the same path. Teams' velocities will go up and down, but on the average they won't change that much, and then you can say, okay, I got a bid for, from the team in Pune for 600 points to do the JBoss migration in their area, and I can quickly create that to a dollar and cents number. So we're not out to make things weirder for teams, just the opposite. But we have to make things make sense for programs, or our Agile initiative will get stomped as soon as some financially accountable individual says, oh, you can't compare velocities amongst teams, and they're really gummy bears and it doesn't really mean anything. And he says, well, how much is this going to cost? And they say, well, we don't do work breakdown structures anymore. And that PMO guy says, well, we don't do Agile anymore either, gentlemen.
All right. So thanks for introducing us to that conversation. I'm sure many people will be having discussions on how to work through those mechanics.
Yeah, and by the way, I just put up a blog post this weekend because interestingly enough, that question came up in courseware, and one of the holes we had in SAFE, it had never been discussed in SAFE. It is now discussed in SAFE and summarized in the team backlog article. So it is online as of like 4 hours ago.
Wow. So there's an example of how the community is continuing to grow and increase its body of knowledge.
That's correct.
All right. So another question, someone asking, I don't know if we've spent a lot of time on this so far, and this gets more to the I guess, tactical side. It was just comments on using SAFE in a distributed environment. You know, what would you guidance would you give someone who does have distributed teams and looking to implement SAFE?
Okay, all development at scale is distributed. Now, you also said distributed teams, and if what you meant by that is I have a developer in San Diego and 3 testers in Pune and a product owner in Pittsburgh, well, that's what I would call stupid, right? You're going to have a heck of a poor time making an Agile team out of that. But let's say that we're beyond that. We say, no, most all of our teams themselves are localized, or if we have a split overseas relationship, it's still a single team. They are distributed, but they all wear the same T-shirts. They eat the same pizza. They commit to the same thing. Now, having said that, when you move to the program level, by definition, various teams are going to be distributed. So we can't care about that, because what we're looking for is where's the value, how does the value flow through the enterprise, and we make Agile programs out of that. So we don't have to deal with the issue of large-scale distribution by saying let's undistribute ourselves. We take a virtual approach, and the virtual approach says, look, they may be in Pune, Mumbai, Beijing, and San Diego, okay? But they're all going to work in a single program, and we're going to plan together. We're not going to fly everybody around. We're going to plan what we call face-to-face to face-to-face. We're going to commit together. Everybody gets the same T-shirt. Nobody has to change their jobs. Maybe a few people are moving their desks because we want to get the devs closer to the testers. So we build virtual organizations at the Agile release train level. Over time, the organization will evolve, because it turns out it's easier to ship software when you're solution aligned than when you're functionally oriented, but it's a hard argument to make up front. So take a single program, make a virtual team, solution align it, prove the benefits, and the organization will likely follow.
All right, thanks, Dean. So next question, I wanted to get more to, it sounds like from Craig. Craig was, I think saying to himself, hey, this looks valuable to me. So do you have any suggestions for how to demonstrate to management the value we'd get from adopting SAFE? And, basically how can you engage SAFE experts to help out with training? Like what's that look like for someone who really wants to take the next step from, hey, this looks like it'll work, to I want to start down the path of seeing how it would fit into my organization?
Really 3 things. One is that I have a version of this briefing that I posted to the webinar under download. So you could use that to describe the business benefits and at least tell them what SAFE is. When they see it, it doesn't seem crazy. It just seems sensible. 2, we have a variety of case studies on the web now, and we continue to put more case studies there. All those case studies are referenceable. They're complete with hard stats, and they're approachable. Some of them even do benchmarking and would have you in. And 3rd, the Scaled Agile Partner site, scaledagilepartners.com. Those are people that have partnered with us to do service delivery, and there's a dozen or so partners there now, and there are 400 or 500 certified SAFE program consultants that are working every day to do these implementations. There's actually quite a wide community, a support community. We as Scaled Agile, we're focused on creating the IP and the courseware and certification. We leave the heavy lifting to our partner network and to the enterprise itself. One of our largest enterprises right now has 40 SAFE program consultants, and they've trained 120 lean thinking SAFE manager teachers. So they basically said, this is us, we take responsibility, we'll use this courseware and train internally.
All right, thank you, Dean. And everyone, I think we've reached 1 o'clock Eastern, so I'd like to once again thank Dean for joining us for this 1-hour webinar, and Dean, lots of good insights here, and everyone, thank you for attending.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.